Renita, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tim. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Oh, I am so excited to speak with you and appreciate your time so much. Renita, I think a great question to start with is to talk about you and your story, the work that you've done that has helped bolster the work that you're doing now. Very important work. And when you and I met here on the campus of Indiana University, I was so inspired by your energy and your tough love that you shared with each of us about the importance of making space for this conversation, this ongoing conversation.
I appreciate that, Tim. And, at the core of the work of inclusion and diversity and equity and justice and all the things that really make up who we are, I think at the end of the day as human beings. And that's really what has been a North Star for me. I will say when I initially, maybe 15 or so years ago, was exposed to diversity. It was actually brought to me as an opportunity to lead a development experience for 500 or so managers. And at the time, I was the global lead of leadership development, and the CEO basically asked me to put together a class, which I did, because that's the work that was, part of my areas of responsibility. But then there was something about this work that was a little bit different than deploying a leadership skill building experience. So I came to become a student of diversity and inclusion, and really taking the time to step away from it just being a skill that you build. It really is at its core how we navigate ourselves in our culture. And then culture sometimes happens certainly within the four walls of an institution that we're part of, but it's bigger than that. It's how we treat one another, just in the vastness of our connectivity. And so it was through that lens that I would honestly say that I really became emboldened in understanding exactly, what it means to think about inclusion and diversity. What is my role? What example should I be setting? And I had someone say to me very early on that this work is about human nature. And culture and all of the byproducts that we have as a result is if this work is done well. And so that really became my mantra. It matters, certainly within the walls of the institution that is asking you to do the work, but more importantly, it shows up for each of us in our circle of influence. And our circle of influence, as you know, starts with our family and friends and extends out to our colleagues and peers. And so that's really been the way that I've approached the work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Renita. So the work being done now as an entrepreneur, as a global HR leader, as a mom of many, and one who brings such care to each of these roles now, since I've been blessed to get to know you a bit, tell us a little bit more about how the work is being done and what else you're hoping to see. What additional movement are you hoping to see created? What additional dialogue and discussion are you hoping to see, Renita, as you continue doing this important work?
What I've seen, Tim, over the last, I would say 5 to 7 years, is different than when I initially started the work, is this idea of dialogue and introducing the opportunity for candid conversations. Early on, as I said, certainly there were ways by which experiences in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion were kind of manifest itself, and it was the right thing to do. But where I've seen transition, and I think it's important, and I'm hoping to see even more of that, is creating the space for intersectionality and these conversations, this candid dialogue that's representative of how individuals are navigating, who they are. There's a lot of work in the space of identity and identity being broader than what perhaps we would have thought 5 to 7 years ago. Doing that personal inventory. What do you stand for? What interests do you have to continue to grow? How do you bring purposeful dialogue, into a room? The intent to broaden your perspective. And what another reason I love this work is that this is a lifelong journey. I say to folks all the time, and I said to you and your peers early on when we connected, it's not a magic wand. I don't get to do this at the end of the classes that you're christened, that you're now diverse and you get it. So it really is this idea of being on this journey and how the evolution of that journey, what that means to you and what that means to those that are part of your circle of influence. So this idea of candid dialogue around a topic, a social justice issue. There's a lot of really great content out there to pull upon, i.e. what we're doing here today, to take a topic and pull it forward. What does that mean to you? Why does it matter? How are you making the connection? You mentioned my role as a mom, and I've shared with you and your peers. I'm a mother of 4 boys, so 4 African-American boys, out and about, and being part of society, and how does that sit with me? What growing up, what is it that we needed to impart on them as it relates to how they navigate themselves, right, in various social settings. And so it kind of allows me to kind of take that on when I am speaking with my peers and having an opportunity to put my voice in a room, because I've felt as though I've walked in the shoes of many who have found themselves in situations and circumstances where they have influence and not quite understand what they need to do next. So, kind of to get back to your question, this idea of where do I see it going next is, I think the deepening of these dialogues, conversations is the next bridge. I'm going to intentionally use the word bridge that we can consider, and that's internationally, and how do we come together and make those connections.
I like the word bridge, bringing people together, reciprocity, inclusion, pathways. Thank you, Renita. At our dinner table, my children, my wife and I, we've been discussing intersectionality. And you brought that word into my vocabulary, some awareness of it, but certainly appreciate so much what you shared during your time during the sessions here at the Kelley School. When I think about the linkages, and I read the term all oppressions linked. Very interesting. Maybe we could take a moment and touch on intersectionality, the term itself, and then how might we be better aware of the complexity of this area and this word?
That's a really great question, and it in and of itself could be its own podcast. I think I even joked with you guys when I introduced it that it could be its own its own course. Intersectionality, I think in its simplest terms, is, and if you take the word of part, right, it's really where there is a time where folks will come together and get a sense of the uniqueness that they bring into a situation. That can be a conversation, that could certainly be a way by which I'm experiencing some experience, someone as I observe, right, an interaction, and what I bring is my full self. So I bring myself as a Black professional woman, mom, it just kind of think through as you stand in a space what you represent. And then you have that time that you come across someone that is bringing a different set of perspectives, and how do these perspectives come together to hopefully create a dialogue and growth and movement. But often what gets in the way is predetermined stereotypes, ways by which I've allowed other influences to paint my view of the individual or the experience that's in front of me. And so that intersectionality is halted because I'm not fully aware of the opportunity. So to me, intersectionality is a way by which we can stay vigilant regarding other points of view, vigilant, even though with great passion, and we see, we see the pictures of the passion that individuals have behind, certain scenarios. How does that help me as an individual make a determination where I am going to step forward and offer my voice, my engagement, and my experience? So, intersectionality happens. I feel like it's almost this force that's around us as we carry ourselves and navigate with one another. But it's definitely something to, keep in mind, especially as a scenario. The tension starts to rise. What is it that we can kind of hone in on to make a connection versus being one that's conflict driven, just for the sake of conflict and not for growth and understanding.
Thank you, Renita.
Mm-hmm.
When you were on campus as well, you and I had a side conversation, and it really resonated with me, your wonderful explanation of inaction being a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat with that for a while. And I wanted to bring that up today because I think that heightened awareness for myself, and I know many others in the room, it was an important time. So as we look into the global workforce and the global workspace, how do we better make space for the dialogue and heighten the awareness, Renita, that inaction is a choice? What are your recommendations?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Because I sit with inaction myself. When I was doing the research to bring that to you and your colleagues, I had to sit with it too. I think that there are crossroads that we face, again, as we navigate ourselves in the world, and inaction somewhat sits in what you value, right? So really having that conscious awareness of what are my values. If your values come from the space of recognizing, a loaded word here, but injustice in some way, and you have that within you, you experience inaction quite differently. I'm struggling with advice, because what I would say, this is one of the areas that individuals will need to understand for themselves. What does that mean? What examples can I pull from? Because we can all pull from examples where we've walked away and reflected and thought, I could have done something a little bit differently. And why didn't I? It's very much about self-examination. Why didn't I? What got in the way? What scared me? What did I care about what other people were thinking, in the moment? This isn't fight or flight. I'm not talking about that. It's just kind of that pure in the moment. I did not act in a way that, as I reflected and I'm questioning myself, why didn't I act? And recognize what those traits were. So when it's not if, so when they repeat again, that recollection comes to me, and I stand in the choice that I felt I should have potentially made when I didn't before. It's really the observation that inaction in and of itself is an action. And if I am honest with myself, again, coming from a place of, what do I value? What others think, what I think, what I, inherently know, what, right and wrong and all of those kinds of things. And I choose to act differently. I have to figure that out for myself. And again, getting back to my circle of influence, were children there, was a partner there, was, did your inaction show, and this as parents, it's not what you say, is what you do, right? So sometimes we don't have a do-over, and those that are observing your behavior, what's your responsibility there? So it's a very interesting kind of psychological, study, I would honestly say. But the takeaway is inaction is non-action. And as we think about the humanistic aspect of this work, especially the social justice component, where do you stand? Is it consistent with your values? And how are you feeling as you have an experience and you walk away? Will you get another chance? All of those questions you have to answer for yourself. It's a very conscious, driven aspect of human nature.
Well said. And we all need to have our personal call to action, right? Now more than ever. You shared much with us, data and stories, Renita, where it is crystal clear that racism and social injustice appears and is at a premium these days. How do we all better own this? And how do we all better come together to do something about it?
Another really good point, Tim. You have, in my opinion, and what I've done for myself is to get a sense of, first of all, the word authentic is coming to mind for me. We are inundated with this information. One of my greatest concerns, and I find myself sometime in this space too, is that you become numb to it. I was just having a conversation and we were talking about a recent incident, and we got the names mixed up. And I walked away thinking, I felt really bad about that, because in that moment, in that opportunity for dialogue, I couldn't honor that name. It's because it's so many names to remember. And I'm beating myself up about that. That's my own personal takeaway. But, this idea of justice, you have to kind of figure out, at least in my mind, what is it that I can influence and consistently influence? This can't be a boil the ocean, right? I can't be at every pick an opportunity. But in my, again, the circle of influence is so important. In my circle of influence, in my role, so I'm the global director of diversity and equity advancement for the Avient organization. So that's a pretty big sphere of influence, right? So in that role, as I think about social justice around the world, it's a lot to take in. However, what I can do is I can get a sense of the allies that I have around the organization, around the globe, bring those individuals together, and we make a conscious effort of, from a branding perspective, right? Where, you know, how is it that our organization stands in this space? So that's definitely one way to go with it from kind of your professional lens, if you will. From a personal lens, what I grapple with is the consistency of what it is that I can support and how I can do that financially, how I can do that with appearance, and how I can do that in these kinds of opportunities, whether on a panel or a keynote, you know, kind of figuring out your platforms, what it is that you want to share, being consistent with that message, and recognizing that a call to action is part of that responsibility. It is very, I shouldn't say easy, but there are certainly options that are more courageous, perhaps, in the eyes of others, but they could still, in fact, have, you know, similar influence. So you have to, I feel that there's a bit of a spectrum when you think about this work,
great
right?
Word, great
so
word.
Think about the spectrum and what's high and low for you. Same thing with kind of a bit of the inaction, kind of taking that internally, but being intentional about the exercise. We have to do it. We can't be a bystander. I know we're going to talk about allyship. So these are all action-oriented spaces. So moving people and myself from that bystander space to, I have to make a decision. Here's the spectrum. Here's what I know and what I'm willing to do as a result of what I've experienced. And figuring out what that is and being consistent with that movement, I think is where I found the greatest sense of engagement.
Thank you. When I think about allyship and what you shared with us too while you were here on campus, Renita, yes, we make mistakes. We all do. I have a few that certainly haunt me where I had opportunities for action, for allyship, and I chose inaction. But I appreciate that you forgave us all in a public space and said, next time, if you bring this heightened awareness to choice making, and if one is working toward becoming a greater ally, forgive yourself and get back to it, right?
Absolutely I have to tell you, you know, in my, I have an opportunity to do, as I have with the Kelley School of Business, consulting. And I would say more mature later in my career and maturity of my consultant opportunities, I've lost count of the CEOs that I've met with that have said to me, can you create an experience for my leaders and tell them what to say? And I think that was an undercurrent of what I consistently heard of when I find myself in this situation. Is there a phrase? Is there a response? Is there a term? All of this. And so people wanted to get it right. And early on, I headed down that path to some degree. But as I matured and met with others and broadened, obviously, even more my perspective, I actually started many of my programs basically saying, I don't have a script for you. There's not a script. None of us have a script. It really is, how do I educate and develop my, absolutely you want to, be an lifelong learner. As I said, this is a journey, not a destination. You want to pick up things along the way, right? And what you pick up may not be what I pick up, but that's okay. When you find yourself in experiences or in encounters where where language matters and maybe terminology will make a difference, and there's a misstep, and what I shared with you and your colleagues is own the misstep. If there is true if you're authentic about moving forward in this space, in that moment, offer what's needed. An apology. I want more insight. I'd like to advance this engagement. Here's what I know and where I stand. You want to be, and then there's some vulnerability, right? That has to happen there. But without that vulnerability and curiosity, there's no growth. And it's not only for this work, that you can put that title or those descriptors on quite a bit of what we do. This is exactly the same. If, we have, especially if we have a relationship or we're striving to build a relationship, and I know that you're coming from a place of authentic curiosity and interest, I'll give you that freedom. And I will then say, Tim, I'm going to lean in and say, when we talk about this again, or the term that you used, or, it's then our opportunity for an exchange for development. And I think that that has served me well in responding to the ask of, is there a script? There's not a script.
Renita, thank you so much for sharing with us today, helping us to learn and grow, and also for challenging us to continue to move forward and accept our role in this journey, right? Because I think, as you also said so beautifully, we all want to be a part of growth, and a growth mindset allows us to do that. And adopting and owning this growth mindset is a daily challenge that we each need to commit to become the allies, to become the inclusive leaders, to become the colleagues that accept and celebrate, moving from tolerance to acceptance, right?
Yes.
And you taught me that.
Student.
Well, thanks. Even at my age, I'm grateful that you said that. Thank you. So again, it was such a pleasure speaking with you, Renita. I look forward to our next discussion.
I do too, Tim. Thank you so much for the platform. Circling back and reconnecting, it's affirming. So I appreciate that very much. And what I feel and sense that we've done through our journey of coming together for this opportunity is to create a great partnership and relationship. And that's really what the work is about. So it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renita. Have a great day.
All righty, you do the same.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.